Hi, I'm Alison from Burningsuit, and in this first video we're going to look at how the Microsoft Power BI Key Influencers visual can be used to analyse the Strictly Come Dancing data. But before we do that, let's just look at the data we're going to be using. So I'm just going to move now into Data View and look at the scores table. And in this table we record every score from every judge out of 10 across the whole 17 series for every dance. So here's our scores column recording each judge's score. And the other table we're going to be using is the dances table. In this table we record every dance that a contestant dance and also the total dance score for the dance. And finally we are going to be using the contestants table, and in the contestants table we have recorded every contestant, and we're going to be looking at attributes such as gender and age. So let's now get the key influencers to work. So I'm just going to now move to Report View and select the Key Influencers visual from the Visuals gallery. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask the Key Influencers visual a specific question. So apart from natural dance talent, what other factors may influence our judges to give our contestants a better score? So the starting point is to put into the Analyze bucket the metric I want to use. So for us, that's going to be that scores column from the scores table. So I'm just going to find that column now and place that in the Analyze bucket. And now what factors do we think might contribute to our judges giving contestants a better score? Well, perhaps gender has an influence on their scores. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick from my contestants table the column called gender. So let me just find that now in the list. So I can place that in the Explain By bucket. And now my Key Influencers visual has popped to life. And here on the left-hand side, we get listed any influences that the Key Influence visual finds. So in this case, it's found gender being female. And when gender is female, it has told me that the average score will increase by 0.43. Now, where does this 0.43 come from? What is the analysis being done behind this influencer? So to find that answer, we need to look at the visual that accompanies this particular influencer. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't see very clearly the colours that are being used here. So what I'm going to do now is just to recolor the visual so we can see more clearly the data that we're looking at. So I'm just going to move now to the paint roller, and in the Analyst Visual Colors, I'm just going to lighten up the primary color and just darken up the text color. And then from the Drill Visual Colors, I'm just going to again lighten the default color. And that just allows us to see more clearly some of these figures that are appearing in the visual. So this visual is representing our influencer, which is female contestants in a column chart. And if we hover over the column that represents our female contestants, we can see that the average score for female contestants is 7.5. And now we can look at the average score for all other genders other than female. Now for us, of course, that's just male contestants. So we can see that the average score for all other genders is 7.07, and that's the value that you can see here above the dotted line. So 0.43 is just the difference between the average for our influencer and the average for all other factors in that field. So perhaps there are some other influencers that are going to affect the judge's score. Let's go and have a look. Perhaps age will have a factor. So I'm going to move age now into the Explain By. Perhaps the dance that the contestants performed has a factor in our judges' scoring. So I'm going to now put dance in the Explain By. And finally, another factor that may influence scores is the order in which our contestants performed. So in my dancers table, I have a column that records whether they danced first, last, or in the middle. And here, this is the column called first or last. So now we've got a lot more to see in the Key Influencers visual. And what we've been told is that when dance is street, the average dance score goes up by 1.5. So we can now again look at the analysis that we're given in the associated column chart. So here if I hover over my street dance, we can see the average score for street is 8.78. But the average score for all other types of dance is only 7.29, and so the difference between these two averages is 1.5. And of course we have a similar analysis for the Argentine tango. But let us now look at the age as an influencer. And we've been told that if age is 31 or less, then contestants on average will get a score of 1.22 higher than the average for all the other contestants. So when we're looking at numeric type influencers, we get our numbers grouped into bins or numeric ranges. And this is what we're looking at in this visual here. So our ages have been grouped into 5 separate age ranges. And the influencer, of course, is the contestants that sit in this age group, 31 or less. So again, we can see that contestants in this age range get an average score of 8.08, but all older contestants get an average score of 6.86, and again the difference there being 1.22. So again, we can go and look at these calculations in a bit more detail. So what I've done is I've done my own calculations just to cross-check what's going on behind the Key Influencers visual. So I'm just going to move now to this page, Results Explained. So here we can see the street dancers, and just as my Key Influencer visual tells me, if our contestants dance a street dance, they will get an average score of 8.78. But any other dance only gets an average score of 7.29. So the difference that we see in the Key Influencer bubble is 1.5. And again, we can see here a similar thing for our ages. All contestants aged 31 or less get an average score of 8.08, but all contestants older only get an average score of 6.86, making a difference of 1.22. And this is the value that we see in the bubble of the Key Influencers visual. So let's now return to the Key Influencers visual and see what else we can find out from this visual. So what we can now conclude is that if we're female, if we're age 31 or less, and we dance last, this has also been a factor in our judges' scores, and we dance street, we should expect to get a better score. But how likely is it that I'm going to dance street? How likely is it that I'm going to ever get to dance an Argentine tango? Now, of course, our contestants only dance each dance once or the most twice, and perhaps some dancers, such as street, they never dance. So each individual dance is not a contributory factor to every weekly competition, whereas our age, our gender, and the order in which we dance are consistent factors across all weeks of the competition. Now we can actually start to analyse that factor of the analysis by hovering over the bubbles that occur in the Key Influencers visual. If I hover over my bubble for my street dance, I'm told the percentage that street dance comprises of the entire data set. And I'm told that street dance only comprises 0.41% of the entire data set. And I've got a similar very small percentage for my Argentine tango. But if I now look at the percentage that contestants aged 31 or less comprise of the entire data set, it's a much larger percentage, 35.32. Similar with my order of being last, my dance order being last, 10.56. And finally, of course, gender being female, we can expect to be roughly half the entire data set. So the dancers that the contestants perform are very small factors in the when we consider all other factors influencing our scores. Now we can get the Key Influencers visual to throw light on exactly this aspect of the analysis. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to the paint roller, and in the analysis card I'm going to enable counts. And what we will get if we enable counts is we'll get a thin grey line around the influencer bubble that indicates the percentage that influencer comprises of the entire data set. So you can see now here, when my dance is street, it's such a tiny percentage I can hardly see the grey line. But if I look at my gender bubble, I can see the grey line comprising almost half of that bubble, as we know gender being female comprises just over half the data set. But I can go one step further. At the moment, if we look down towards the bottom left of the visual, we will see that we're sorting by impact, how much higher the score will be. But if we now change that to sort by count, we're now given a different aspect to the analysis. And here we're given an order where the largest factor within the analysis rises to the top. So because our females take up almost half of our data set, it is now rises to the top of our analysis. So let's now ask the Key Influencers Visual another question. What combination of these influencers would result in our judges giving our contestants a higher score? So is it true to say that if I'm female and 31 and dance last, that combination of factors will contribute to the higher score? Before this, we can move to the top segments. So our Key Influencers Visual is divided across two different parts. Currently, we've been looking at the Key Influencers part of the Key Influencers Visual, but now we're going to move to the top segments. And what top segments does is it looks at all those influencers and groups according to the combination of influencers that result in our judges giving a higher score. And we can see that we've got 4 different segments, and this is our top segment, where contestants in this segment get an average score of 8.35. So let's look and see which contestants comprise this segment, and I can do that by clicking on the bubble. And I'm told that in this segment, contestants are aged 31 or less and dance either first or last. So contestants that fall into this segment get an average score of 8.35. Now we're also told for the first time what the average score for all contestants is, which is 7.29. So we can see that this average score is quite a bit higher, in fact 1.06 higher, than the score over all contestants. Let's now look at our second segment. So in this segment, contestants get an average score of 8.05. So again, we're identifying contestants aged 31 or less, but this time gender is taken into account and we've got female genders. But notice the dance order isn't significant. So again, contestants in this segment get an average score of 8.05, and again we can compare that to the average overall, which is 7.29. But what we also might like to look at, and what is also going to be interesting for us, and I'm just going to move back to my top segment for this, is the number of data points that are taken into account in the analysis. These are the number of data points in the scores table. So my Key Influencers Visual is looking at the row granularity of that scores table. So in other words, I can say that contestants aged 31 or less and who dance either first or last comprise 720 scores out of the entire number of scores in the scores table. The entire number of scores in the scores table is just under 8,000. So let's now return to our Key Influencers Visual. So what we conclude now is that if we are female, we're aged 31 or less, and we dance last, we are probably going to perhaps get into the final of the Strictly Come Dancing competition. And if we happen to be given the opportunity to perform a street dance, hey, well, that's all the better. Now, up till now, we've just been looking at using the Key Influencers Visual to analyze what's called a continuous analysis. And that's the default on the Key Influencers Visual, where we simply look at a numeric column to see how that metric will increase. But in my next video, we're going to look at how we can use the Key Influencers Visual to use what's called the categorical analysis.